Welcome back. All right, so power rankings. I'm starting these after midnight, and yet I'm going to date them from March the 11th because technically these are for the games that are March the 11th. As we lose an hour of sleep tonight, so fun. And as I said in the recap video, this means I'm probably going to be pretty tired for today's and tomorrow's videos, and I apologize for that and for any misspeaking that might happen as a result of me being a little bit overtired. So 1 through 32 power rankings. We've been over this before. We're doing this again. And we're starting at number 32. Down 3 spots from last week, it's the San Jose Sharks. Yep, they're last overall now. You know what's interesting to me is I'm watching the San Jose feed of tonight's game, and they're talking a lot about, boy, if the Sharks can go back and tie this, and if they can get the win. And I understand announcers are supposed to sell fans on the idea of hope, but if you're a San Jose fan, aren't you arguing with the TV? Are you saying to the TV, no, we don't want to tie this. We don't want to go to overtime. We don't want the point. No, stop it. I feel like there's got to be a lot of fans that do that. But of course, for announcers, they're not going to say that. Oh, great. Now we tied it. Oh, now we won. We got 2 points. Blah, we're not going to get Bedard. It's not going to happen. So at any rate, San Jose loses tonight. They're right near the bottom of the league. They're 3 points clear of Columbus. But right now, for my money, they'd be 32nd on the board. Number 31. Dropping 1 spot from last week, Chicago. The Chicago Blackhawks. Tonight against Tampa, it's kind of your standard Chicago game. They can go long stretches without a shot. They still end up being in the game. They end up losing said game. The work ethic's there. I honestly think that Luke Richardson, with the right team behind him next year, we could see a turnaround with Chicago. But I don't know what to expect with so many teams right now that are in this rebuilding mode. How many of them are going to be expecting to bounce back next year, and how many are going to say, you know what, we'll have another year of the rebuilding, and then the year after we're going to start getting better, right? So we'll see, and that's something I can definitely investigate in the offseason and do videos on. But for right now, Chicago's 31st on the board. 30th on the board, basically switching spots with them. So moving up 1 spot from last week is Philadelphia. For the Flyers, the work ethic's there, much like Chicago. They're in the games. They do not have the offense to win said games. So both Chicago and Philly in similar situations. Apparently, Philadelphia is going to change their jerseys next year. Here's my guess. They're going to get rid of that glow-in-the-dark orange color that they have. It doesn't actually glow in the dark, but it looks like a safety vest. And I think they'll go back to their old orange. I think that's my guess as to what's going to happen. If you look at their reverse retros, both of them have been that orange color, and I think it's basically agreed upon by everybody that burnt orange color they had was better. And that's what I have to talk about Philly this week is whether or not they're going to change their jerseys, because the playoffs, that's a dream that's gone. Even Tortorella's not trying to sell us on that right now. Next up, number 29, moving up 3 spots from last week, Arizona. The Coyotes managing to win their share of games here and there, forcing points here and there. Ingram earns a point by himself in that game against Colorado today. And so, yeah, Arizona might be pulling themselves out of the Bedard conversation. The good news is they have approximately, 650 draft picks over the next 3 years. They have a ridiculous amount of draft picks. They already have a lot of prospects in their system. They have a lot of good young players that are already on their team or coming onto their team, between now and the start of next season. I think Arizona is going to be fun to watch soon enough. But yeah, so they're 29 this week. They're not as much fun to watch yet, but they will be. Number 28, same spot as last week, Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks, 28th overall. So again, not much change here really. You just see these 2 flip spots, Anaheim in the same spot that they were last week. Not much really to add with Anaheim when a team stays in the same spot. It's just, and again, this week it felt like there were more nights that I would look at the board at the end of the day and say those teams are in the right spots. So there's been some weeks, there's been some dramatic movement. Minnesota being the most obvious, right? And I'm pointing at my jersey because it's Minnesota North Stars. But the Minnesota Wild, a few weeks ago, they moved up 11 spots. There were some conversations about, but again, when I feel like a team's playing a lot better, they'll move up. And in this case, in Anaheim, they just played about the same. 27th. And same spot as last week. Columbus. So Columbus, again, same thing. And it feels like the teams that are in the bottom row probably going to stay in the bottom row the rest of the season. I'd be kind of surprised if they move up. Columbus, though, they've been game. They just don't really have the horses to win the games. And who knows, if they had Jonathan Quick playing the way that he is in Vegas, maybe they would have won a couple of these games. But that's all by the wayside right now because they traded him because he wouldn't report. Number 26, same spot as last week. This is going to bore some people, isn't it? Montreal. So the Montreal Canadiens stay in the same spot. So that's 3 in a row that stay in the same spot. Montreal losing against New Jersey. Again, they're entertaining at points. They've sold off at the deadline. There's a lot of teams in this, again, this part of the board that likely to stay here for the rest of the season. I remember when I used to do NFL power rankings, there were times towards the end of the season that I would suggest that maybe I should only do power rankings of the top 20, but I never did. I kept the power rankings everybody, but it kept feeling kind of silly. It's less silly with the National Hockey League, but still, these are all teams that just aren't making the playoffs. We know that right now. Number 25, dropping 1 spot from last week. St. Louis. So the Blues are back in the bottom row. Yes, they beat Columbus tonight, but look where Columbus is on the board. And Columbus outshot them 22-7 in the third period tonight. So, honestly, Greiss had a really good game for St. Louis, which is good. It feels like it's been a while since Greiss had a really good game for them. And so for the St. Louis Blues, they're in the bottom row. But again, they sold at the deadline. This is kind of what was expected. I don't think Craig Berube is approving of the selling at the deadline, but it's not really his call. And his job is to get as many points as he can out of the team that he's given. And the team that he's given right now, just it doesn't have what you need in order to make a run towards a playoff spot. Number 24. And dropping off 5 spots from last week, Detroit. Yeah, Detroit's fallen from 12th to 24th in 2 weeks. It has been a perilous drop, but it just feels like it's gone for them. Like they had the 2-0 lead over Boston, and then once Boston started that comeback, as much as Hellberg was doing everything he could to hold them off, you just felt like it was a matter of time and then Boston was going to beat them. And of course, they have the rematch tomorrow in Detroit, so we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, for Detroit, they're in better luck next year territory. The drop-off was expected after the trade deadline was done, and here we are. Number 23, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Vancouver Canucks. Yep, there it is. Trust me, this logo I've used now 3 times today. I promise I'm not going to be using it that often, but I do like the logo a lot. At any rate, Vancouver moving up a spot. They've won 4 games in a row. I don't know how much higher they're going to get. I do believe that what's going on with Vancouver right now is going to be perceived as, hey, this is a team that's going to be in the playoffs next year, or at least close. And I'm not convinced that's going to be the case. I want to see what happens in the offseason. And these runs at the end of the season, it's great. It's fine that they've won 4 in a row. But I'm going to hold. I'm going to reserve judgment at this point. And any optimism, I'm going to hold off. It is too bad that they're not going to end up in a position where they can draft Bedard. But it is what it is. I said earlier in the season, before they were in that dire position, they didn't really need a Connor Bedard as much as some of the other teams in the league. But it'd be fun if they had him, wouldn't it? All right, number 22. Moving up 1 spot from last week. Calgary. So the Flames move up 1 spot. And it is interesting to see some teams below the playoff line that sometimes look inspired to play and sometimes they don't. And for Calgary, it's been that. Sometimes they look like they want to play and they want a shot at that Stanley Cup. And some games they just don't look quite as interested in being in that, like against Anaheim. They lost that game. You can't lose a game at home against Anaheim. So they move up 1 spot because Detroit drops as far as they do. Not because Calgary had a great week, just Detroit. It's clearly done. For Calgary, it's not clearly done yet, but it's close. Now, working in Calgary's favor has been the fact that the Jets haven't exactly been running away with, that playoff spot, but maybe tonight's game between Winnipeg and Florida will start to change their fortunes. But yeah, Calgary 22nd on the board. Number 21, also moving up 1 spot from last week, Washington Capitals. Yep, so the Capitals get that big win in New York against the Islanders tonight. They've now won 4 out of their last 11, but they've won, I think, 3 out of their last 4. It's something like that. So they're trending in the right direction. They're still below the playoff line. The odds of them making the playoffs are still not great. But we'll see. There's still enough time left that if Washington can really make a run out of this, especially if Ovechkin starts putting the puck in the net again as well. Although they haven't needed that so much over the last few weeks either. But yeah, For Washington, they're staying in the hunt, but it does feel like essentially the Islanders and Pittsburgh probably get those last two spots in the East. Number 20. And a rather precipitous drop, too, for Buffalo. They drop off 7 spots. Just a really disheartening week for Buffalo. That 10-4 loss against Dallas, and then they lose against the Rangers, and these are losses at home, right? They just do not play well at home, which is too bad because they also don't sell tickets very well at home either. And so I definitely think one feeds the other. And they're really good on the road, but if you can't win at home, you don't make the playoffs. And that's where Buffalo finds themselves right now. So it is an absolute shame that Buffalo's out of those top 2 rows, but I just the road to the playoffs is becoming narrower as the days go by, and it just feels like they're going to run out of road. Next on the board, number 19, and moving up 2 spots from last week, Nashville. Nashville at times has looked disinterested. Game against Arizona, for instance, they lose that game. But tonight they win a game in a shootout in LA. They break LA's 5-game winning streak. So Nashville's still in this. And again, it feels like part of it is probably because of Winnipeg having issues with winning. Colorado had a couple of losses this week as well. And so there's still a door that's open a crack there, and Nashville may be able to get through it. But again, we're up to that point where there's not as many games left as you'd like if you're chasing a playoff spot, and the point difference gets a bit daunting. Because, again, there's a lot of 3-point games in the National Hockey League. Not as many today, though, as I would have expected with a 15-game day. I think there was only 3 that ended up being 3-point games. But still, that's 1 out of every 5, and it can add up. So, Nashville moves up just a couple of spots this week. Number 18. Same spot as last week, Ottawa. So the Sens moved up last week. They stayed in the same spot this week. I had Ottawa fans telling me last week I didn't move them up enough, that they should have moved up more. But this is why I don't make dramatic moves. Dramatic moves are only for, and again, I'll mention the Minnesota case, where I see that they're playing a completely different game, and clearly it's working. In Ottawa's case, they got some wins, but they've managed to pull out some losses this week. A loss against Chicago, the loss against Vancouver, but they had the win over Seattle in between. To me, they stay in 18th. That's the right spot for them. I do hope it changes. They got the game in Calgary, then they got the game in Edmonton. They need to turn it around quickly because tomorrow night they're in Calgary. And again, the Flames should be playing desperate hockey. Should be. But so should the Sens. And the fact they only had 5 shots in the first period against Vancouver, I found that really telling. After that first period, I thought, wow, Ottawa, maybe they're just not, they just don't have it, right? So, number 17. Moving up 3 spots from last week, Jets. So the Jets aren't in the top 2 rows yet, but if they have another week like this one, they'll end up in the top 2 rows. There's still some concerns for me when it comes to the Jets and their overall play. I think they could definitely play better. Hopefully Morrissey's okay. Hopefully Lowry's okay. They both got hurt in tonight's game. We should hear an update on them tomorrow. We'll see if I have time to do a news video tomorrow to talk about it, with the hour being lost in hockey all day again. But I'll do my best. I will do my best. And at any rate, for the Winnipeg Jets, it's been an interesting season. If they get in, they're going to be very hard to predict. The West in general are going to be very hard to predict. The Jets could ride Hellebuck to a first-round win, or they could be out in 4 straight. No idea. Number 16, moving up 1 spot from last week. So into the top 16 again, the New York Islanders. The Islanders might have moved up more if not for today's result against the Washington Capitals. So the Washington Capitals result keeps them from moving up a couple of spots. They only move up the 1 spot. The Islanders, though, have improved their chances of making the playoffs with the way they've been playing over the last couple of weeks, combined with teams below the playoff line either selling at the deadline and falling off, or teams just falling off without selling at the deadline. But the Islanders find themselves back in the top half of the board. Number 15, also moving up 1 spot, Pittsburgh. So the Penguins move up to 15th, and this is what I'm talking about. If the Islanders had won tonight against Washington, I would have had them ahead of Pittsburgh, but the combination of them losing to Washington, the win by Pittsburgh over Philadelphia, I left them where they were on the board, and so Pittsburgh moves up to 1 spot. The Islanders move up to 1 spot because Buffalo makes that big drop. Otherwise, they would have been in the same spot as last week, right? So, yeah, for Pittsburgh and the Islanders, it looks like they're going to get those last 2 playoff spots in the East. Number 14 on the board. Also moving up 1 spot from last week, Florida. So again, Florida, not a fantastic week for them, but not an awful one. They're still in the hunt. If there's a team that's going to push either Pittsburgh or the Islanders out, it may very well be Florida. This is one of the reasons why for the Islanders, or for the Senators, the hope's kind of fading. Washington, Florida, it just, there's a lot of teams to jump over to get to the playoffs, and games in hand are going to become less and less of a factor because the schedules are going to even out here. And for Florida, the loss against Winnipeg, we'll see how much that cost them. I didn't move them down because of that tonight. I felt like they outplayed outplayed Winnipeg, but yeah, the result just wasn't there. So they don't end up moving up further than that. Number 13. This just comes off as lazy, doesn't it? Because this team moves up 1 spot too, and that's Dallas. So, yeah, Dallas moves up 1 spot from last week. Decent week for them. Hey, they won in overtime. They actually won a game in overtime. They beat Seattle in overtime. I didn't see that coming. Still kind of surprised that happened. I had actually kind of I had expected a review and to find out it was offside or something had happened. But yeah, they get the win tonight in Seattle. For Dallas, huge 2 points. Absolutely huge 2 points. And they're still in the running to end up finishing first in the West overall. Number 12, dropping 2 spots from last week. It's not a great time for Tampa Bay, but they do get the win against Chicago tonight. They got the win over Philadelphia as well. Definitely a scrappy bunch with the Tampa Bay Lightning now. A lot of fighting in these games now. When you pick up Jeannot, when you pick up Asamont, that'll happen. And so it's nice to see Tampa Bay's toughen themselves up a little bit. Their game's a little bit different. And we'll see how it translates to playoffs. Right now, they're 12th on the board, but once we get to the playoffs, I expect them to be able to turn it on because that's what they do. That's what Tampa Bay's done for the last 3 years. They might look mediocre going into the playoffs, but then once those games are really important, they're really dialed in and they're really hard to defeat. Number 11 on the board, and in the same spot as last week, Edmonton. The Oilers... I have concerns when it comes to the goaltending picture. I have concerns as well defensively. Things should be better than what they are. Especially Ekholm's been very good, and yet the goals against, not great. So the Oilers, definitely some concerns there. They're able to get a bunch of goals. They score in bunches. It seems like it's almost guaranteed that McDavid's going to hit 150 points. He'll be the first player to do that since Mario Lemieux. And yet people still want to complain about what McDavid doesn't do on the ice, even though he's going to score more points than anybody has in about 30 years. But yeah, for the Oilers, it's been an up and down time. I felt like 11th was the right spot for them. Again, at the end of the day, I look at the board and I'm like, yep, that's good. Those teams are in the right spot. Or no, I need to move those teams. Number 10, moving up 2 spots from last week. Back into the top 10 is Seattle. So they did lose the overtime game against Dallas, as surprising as that was to me, but I didn't penalize them for that. They did, lose that game against Ottawa. Didn't penalize them on that one either. I think Seattle in general, playing pretty well. They're still in the hunt for that first spot in the division. The Pacific is still very much up for grabs, although Vegas probably still going to end up winning the division. But yeah, Seattle, I felt like 10th spot was the right place for them this week. Number 9. Same spot as last week. New York Rangers. So the Rangers not quite in the top row, not dropping out of 9th place either though. They get the win over Buffalo today. That was key. The other key right now for the Rangers, and I mean they had a shootout win over Montreal and then the overtime win against Buffalo. These are both teams below the playoff line, of course. But the key for them is too that since their break, their 4 days off, Kane definitely looks better. It looks like Kane's far more comfortable now as a Ranger than he was before. He just needed that break. They needed that practice time. It has made a big difference. So the Rangers are still 9th for 2nd week in a row, but I'm more bullish on them right now than I would have been a week ago at this time. Number 8, dropping 2 spots from last week, Colorado. So the Avs stay in the top row, but it's it's a little bit more perilous of a spot than where they were. They needed overtime to beat Arizona because of Ingram. They outshot the Coyotes 18-0 in the third period. 18-0. It's like the Coyotes heard that a team went without a shot, which was Tampa Bay, and nobody else had, and they're like, well, we can do that. But at any rate, Colorado playing well in that game, having the rough game against LA before that as well. That's why they end up dropping. Not anything dramatic. I still expect them to make the playoffs, and I still expect they're going to be a very difficult out in the first round of the playoffs. Number 7. And same spot as last week, LA. There's a lot of teams in the same spot as last week, which is usually how it works. Even if it's a busy week, usually towards the end of the season, there won't be a lot of big movement. I like LA's game. Their 5-game winning streak was snapped tonight with a shootout loss against Nashville, but I don't feel like that's a reason to feel any kind of a panic or anything. It was a really good game. Copley played quite well, so did Lankinen, and they still get a point out of it. So they fall a point off the pace behind Vegas, but they still managed to garner a point, and Seattle garners a point and keeps up with them, and of course Edmonton doesn't get a point tonight, so they gain a point on Edmonton. Yeah, LA's in really good shape to make the playoffs. Number 6, moving up 2 spots from last week, Minnesota. So I'm wearing a Minnesota North Stars jersey because both Dallas and Minnesota move up this week. It feels like that's probably rare, or maybe not. I just needed an excuse to wear a Minnesota jersey, so here we are. Yeah, the Wild playing really, really well. They've had points in, 13 straight games they've had a point. They lose Kaprizov, and people are like, where's the offense going to come from? And then they get five goals. Now, it's against San Jose. So there's always that asterisk when you get 5 on the San Jose Sharks. But it's something, right? And so for Minnesota, it looks like they're definitely going to be in the playoffs this year. And I don't think Minnesota's going to be an easy team to defeat in the playoffs this year. I know their history. I know Minnesota sports. I know. I don't think they're going to be that easy to eliminate this year. All right, number 5 on the board. So last week I was told that Toronto might be a little bit too high. I saw Leafs fans saying might be a little bit too high. Toronto stays in the same spot this week. My guess is I'll be told that they're a little bit too low, or that they deserve to be up a spot. Again, I feel like Toronto is in the right spot. And I think this is the 3rd straight week they've been number 5. Actually, it's the 4th straight week they've been number 5. So clearly, in my opinion, that's the right spot for them on the board. And the win tonight against Edmonton, there was some sloppiness in that at points, but man, Mitch Marner, I tell you, every year Marner gets better, and Marner is developing into one of the best all-around players in the league. He really is, and I'm not being facetious in saying so. I think that Marner, as he gets older, I don't want to say Selke, because it kind of feels crazy to say it, but at some point in time, I mean, Bergeron's got to retire, and there's other guys who are going to retire, like O'Reilly. Marner may very well be one of those guys who gets respected as a 200-foot forward. The fact that they're willing to play him on the blue line here and there, and they're teaching him some of the defensive aspects, he could absolutely end up being a guy who ends up in the Selke running every year. I'm talking top 5, top 6, that kind of thing. Not necessarily a winner all the time, but he's really turned it around. Because I remember a time where there was all the complaints about not getting goals, or there was complaints about this big game or that big game, and now he's just, I think, their best player. Number 4, dropping 1 spot from last week, Carolina. So they dropped 1 spot for the 2nd straight week. Now, what's funny is I dropped them last week, and then, of course, they had a big game right after that, and they get some goals. And they lost tonight against Vegas 4-0, and that's after they beat Philadelphia 1-0. So it feels like the goal scoring has dried up for Carolina again, right? But Puljujarvi had his first game tonight. I would imagine they'll turn it around. It's only a 1-point drop. It's not a big deal. It's not something to panic about, certainly. And I do expect Carolina to be moving back up the board soon. I would expect by the end of the season they're 1 or 2. And still, when I do my Stanley Cup bracket in a month, Carolina may end up getting my vote to win the Cup. They could. They absolutely could. Number 3, a team that should not be ruled out when it comes to Stanley Cup running, Let me just double check something. Is the other one in here? No, it's not. And that's Vegas. Yeah, Vegas ends up back at number 3. It's been a meandering way that they've gone about it this year, but they're back up to number 3. Impressive win for them in Carolina tonight. Picking up Jonathan Quick. You know, it's funny. The first win, I saw a lot of comments about, oh, they won it because they're Vegas. And Jonathan Quick sucks, and he was terrible. The last couple of games, I haven't seen that because nobody can make that argument. Picking up Quick looks like a stroke of genius by a team that has very excellent pro scouting. They seem to know which players are going to benefit their team the most. And so the Vegas Golden Knights have actually moved into the top 3. It's not that long ago. I think it was the top 7 were all out of the East. Slowly but surely, Minnesota's got in. LA, Colorado, here's Vegas. So 4 of the top 8 now are out of the West. That's good news. So number 2 on the board. Same spot as last week. New Jersey Devils. The Devils go into Montreal tonight. Not the most exciting win, but they get the win. And that's the thing. New Jersey's winning games now. New Jersey is in an excellent position to get first or second in the division. Combined with that loss by Carolina tonight now, yeah, the New Jersey Devils, that division is right there for them. That's right there for them to grab it. So I'm kind of thinking it'd be fun if New Jersey did win the division. They did finish first, and we got Carolina and the Rangers in the first round. And then we could get New Jersey and either Pittsburgh or the Islanders in the first round. If we get New Jersey and the Islanders, that'd be great. If we got New Jersey and Pittsburgh, you'd have the old guard versus the new guard. The storyline writes itself. It'd be absolutely fantastic. So on some level, I am kind of rooting for New Jersey to end up winning the division, just for how great that could make the playoffs. Which means, number 1 on the board, yet again, Boston. Boston Bruins, if they had lost today against Detroit, especially with how that game started, New Jersey would be number 1. Boston had that letdown against Edmonton. If that had rolled over in today's game, I would have dropped him to number 2. Not because, he's doing that because he wants to be different or anything, but because the power ranking should be, here's which team's playing the best right now. And so if Boston takes their foot off the gas, which I expect them to do before the season's out, I don't expect 63 wins. I don't expect them to set a record for points. I expect them to rest guys, and I expect them to lose some games here and there. But you have to drop them down if they're not playing as well as other teams. It doesn't matter where they are in the standings. It doesn't matter how many points they are ahead of everybody else. Power rankings are, this team right now is playing the best in the league. And that's the argument that I have all the time. And I do my best. This is why I watch all the games. This is why I did the 15 games all reviewed today rather than saying, forget it, I'm only going to review half. I've never done that because this is what that's for, is for the power rankings. And so if Boston did lose that game against Detroit, I would have to drop them below New Jersey because I would believe New Jersey right now was playing better than Boston. But Boston gets the comeback. They do win it. And so they stay number 1 this week. We'll see if they stay number 1 next week. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.